10-year-old Lily Matthews never expected that her annual camping trip with her widowed photographer father would turn into a desperate fight for survival when a violent storm separates them in the Colorado wilderness. Lost with a sprained ankle and facing freezing temperatures, Lily experiences the impossible. A herd of wild Mustangs surrounds her, led by a chestnut mare named Citana, who shares her body heat through the night, forming an inexplicable bond that defies natural instinct. As Michael frantically searches for his daughter, both father and child discover that these extraordinary horses, who saved a human life through mysterious compassion, face imminent capture in a government roundup that will destroy their freedom, challenging them to fight for the magnificent creatures who possess an ancient wisdom that transcends the boundary between human and wild. A brief pause before we begin. Write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel. It's free and you can always change your mind. 10-year-old Lily Matthews clutched her father's map with trembling hands as thunder cracked overhead. The dense Colorado forest, which had seemed so magical hours ago, now loomed menacingly around her. As freezing rain began to fall, a horrible realization settled in her stomach. She was completely alone, her father nowhere in sight. A flash of lightning illuminated the valley below, and the silhouettes of wild horses moving through the storm. Lily had no way of knowing that these majestic creatures would not only save her life, but forever change it. "Dad!" Lily called out, her voice swallowed by another thunderclap. "Dad!" Only hours earlier, they had been enjoying their annual father-daughter camping trip, a tradition since her mother had passed away 3 years ago. Michael Matthews, a wildlife photographer with a passion for the outdoors, had planned this special excursion to the remote Elk Mountain Range to photograph the wild Mustangs that roamed there. "This is going to be an adventure you'll never forget, Lilypad," he had promised with a wink as they set up their campsite that morning. The early October air had been crisp but pleasant, the aspen trees a breathtaking tapestry of gold and orange against the evergreens. Lily had been eagerly looking forward to this trip for months. School had been tough lately. New town, new classmates who already had their friend groups, and the constant weight of being the girl whose mom died. Out here in the wilderness with her dad, none of that mattered. It was just them, the mountains, and the promise of seeing wild horses. The weather report had mentioned a possibility of afternoon showers, but nothing about the violent storm that now raged around her. They had hiked to a ridge overlooking a valley where her father had spotted horses the previous year. While he set up his camera equipment, Lily had wandered a short distance away to explore a cluster of interesting rocks. "Don't go far," her father had cautioned, absorbed in adjusting his telephoto lens. "Stay where I can see you." Lily had nodded, already captivated by what looked like fossils embedded in the rocky outcropping. She'd only intended to be gone for a few minutes, but the discovery of what appeared to be an ancient seashell had led her further along the ridge than she had realized. When she finally looked up, dark clouds had rolled in with alarming speed, and a strange fog had settled between her and the spot where her father had been. "Dad," she had called, starting back. Then the first lightning struck, followed almost immediately by deafening thunder. The wind picked up with sudden ferocity, bringing stinging rain that quickly turned to sleet. Lily had run toward where she thought the photography equipment had been set up, but in the rapidly deteriorating visibility, everything looked different. She slipped on the wet rocks, tumbling down a slope, the world spinning around her until she landed hard at the bottom. Pain shot through her ankle, and when she tried to stand, it nearly gave way beneath her. Now, an hour later, completely disoriented and limping badly, Lily huddled under a rocky overhang, the map she'd pulled from her pocket already dissolving in the torrential downpour. The temperature was dropping rapidly as night approached, and her lightweight jacket provided little protection against the elements. Her hiking boots and jeans were soaked through, and she couldn't stop shivering. "Dad will find me," she told herself, trying to ignore the rising panic. "He always finds a way." Michael Matthews had never let her down. After her mother's battle with cancer ended, he had somehow managed to be both mom and dad, learning to braid her hair for school pictures, baking lopsided birthday cakes, and sitting patiently through countless tea parties with her stuffed animals. He was her hero, her safe place. But as darkness fell completely and the temperature continued to plummet, doubt crept in. What if he couldn't find her in this storm? What if he was injured too? The park ranger had mentioned mountain lions were active in the area. What if... "Stop it," Lily commanded herself. "Remember what Dad always says. Panic is the enemy. She tried to recall her father's wilderness survival lessons. She needed shelter, and she needed to stay warm. The rocky overhang provided some protection from the rain, but not from the biting wind that seemed to cut right through her. Her small flashlight revealed nothing but trees whipping violently in the gale, and the rocky slope she had tumbled down. Another flash of lightning illuminated the landscape, and Lily gasped. Not 20 yards away stood a horse, a magnificent chestnut mare with a flowing blonde mane, watching her intently through the storm. For a moment, Lily thought she must be hallucinating. But then another flash revealed more horses behind the mare, at least a dozen of them. The wild Mustangs her father had come to photograph. Lily held her breath. She had always loved horses, had begged for riding lessons since she was 5. But these were wild animals, not the gentle lesson ponies at the stable back home. Would they attack her? Run away? Ignore her completely? The chestnut mare took a step closer, then another. Lily remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might frighten the magnificent creature away. When the mare was just a few feet away, she lowered her head and snorted softly, as if investigating this strange, small human. "Hi there," Lily whispered, her voice shaking from cold and fear. "I'm lost." The mare lifted her head at the sound of Lily's voice but didn't retreat. Instead, she turned slightly and looked back at the herd, then back to Lily, as if communicating something. Incredibly, several more horses cautiously approached. A sharp pain shot through Lily's ankle, reminding her of her injury. She shifted position, trying to find relief, and involuntarily cried out. The sudden noise spooked the horses, and they retreated several yards, watching warily. "I'm sorry," Lily called softly. "Please don't go." To her amazement, the chestnut mare returned, this time coming close enough that Lily could see a jagged scar running down her left shoulder. She lowered her head again, and this time Lily slowly reached out a trembling hand. The mare allowed her fingers to lightly touch her muzzle. The contact sent a surge of warmth through Lily's body. This wild creature, this free spirit of the mountains, was connecting with her. The rain had slackened somewhat, but the wind still howled, and Lily's body temperature was dangerously low. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, and a terrible drowsiness began to overtake her. A drowsiness she somehow knew was dangerous. "Have to stay awake," she thought fuzzily. "Have to," but her eyelids felt so heavy. Maybe just a short nap would help. Just a few minutes. The chestnut mare suddenly whinnied loudly, startling Lily back to full consciousness. The horse pawed at the ground, then, astonishingly, lowered herself to lie down on the ground near Lily, her large body creating a windbreak. One by one, the other horses followed their leader's example, arranging themselves in a semicircle around the girl, their bodies radiating life-saving warmth. Lily couldn't believe what was happening. These wild animals were deliberately sheltering her. As the horses settled around her, she felt the biting cold begin to recede slightly. The chestnut mare was close enough that Lily could lean against her flank, feeling the strong, steady heartbeat of the magnificent animal. "Thank you," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. In the distance, barely audible over the storm, Lily thought she heard someone calling her name. Or was it just the wind playing tricks? She tried to call back, but her voice came out as barely more than a croak. The mare's ears pricked forward, alert to something Lily couldn't detect. Then she raised her head and released a loud, piercing whinny that echoed through the valley. Was someone out there looking for her? Had her father found her trail? Lily strained to see through the darkness, but the night revealed nothing. The horses remained around her, their shared body heat the only thing keeping hypothermia at bay. As exhaustion overtook her, Lily's last conscious thought was of her father's face. "Find me, Dad. Please find me." Little did she know that miles away, a desperate search was already underway. A search that would soon bring together humans and animals in an extraordinary test of survival, connection, and love. Michael Matthews felt the first cold raindrop hit his cheek just as he finished adjusting his camera settings. He looked up at the darkening sky with concern, then glanced back to where Lily had been exploring the rocks. She wasn't there. "Lily," he called, rising from his crouch position. "Lily pad, time to head back." No answer came. Just the rising wind whistling through the pines. "Lily!" Michael shouted louder, scanning the ridge where he'd last seen his daughter. His pulse quickened as he realized she was nowhere in sight. The first lightning bolt split the sky, followed by an explosive crack of thunder that seemed to shake the mountain itself. Within seconds, the gentle rainfall transformed into a deluge. Michael frantically packed his camera equipment, scanning the area in all directions. This wasn't like Lily. She was cautious by nature, especially in the wilderness. Since losing her mother, she'd become even more careful, as if understanding on some deep level how quickly life could change. She wouldn't have wandered far. Unless something had happened to her. The thought sent ice through Michael's veins. He shouldered his backpack and began moving toward the rock formation where he'd last seen his daughter. "Lily!" he bellowed, his voice competing with the howling wind. "Lily Matthews!" Visibility deteriorated by the second as fog rolled in, thick and disorienting. Michael pulled out his compass, determined to conduct a systematic search pattern, but the rapidly worsening conditions made it nearly impossible. Within minutes, he was soaked to the skin, the cold seeping into his bones. He needed help, professional help. Michael pulled out his satellite phone, the emergency device he carried on remote shoots but had never actually needed to use. His hands trembled as he dialed the park ranger station, silently cursing himself for allowing this to happen. How could he have let her out of his sight? What kind of father was he? "Rocky Mountain Emergency Services," a crisp voice answered. "My daughter's missing," Michael said, the words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. "We're on the eastern ridge of Elk Mountain. She's 10 years old, wearing a blue jacket and jeans. The storm hit suddenly and now I can't find her." "Sir, try to stay calm. What's your name and your daughter's name?" "Michael Matthews." "My daughter is Lily Matthews." He struggled to keep his voice steady. "She's been missing for about 20 minutes now. She has blonde hair and a ponytail, blue eyes. She's wearing hiking boots and carrying a small red backpack. Mr. Matthews, I need you to get to safety immediately. This storm is developing into a dangerous system with possible flash flooding in the valleys. We'll dispatch search and rescue right away, but they won't be able to deploy fully until the lightning passes." "I'm not leaving without my daughter," Michael said firmly. "Sir, I understand, but if you're injured or stranded, that creates 2 rescue operations instead of 1. The best thing you can do is return to your vehicle or campsite if it's safe, and meet the rescue team there to provide more details." Michael knew the ranger was right, but the thought of retreating while Lily was out there alone was unbearable. The past 3 years flashed through his mind. Lily's brave face at her mother's funeral, the way she still set out 3 plates for dinner, sometimes out of habit, her muffled crying at night when she thought he couldn't hear. "Mr. Matthews? Are you there?" Michael took a deep breath. "Yes, our campsite is in the designated area at the base of the Eastern Trail. I'll head there now and wait for the team." "Good. Keep your phone on. Search and rescue will be there as soon as possible." The journey back to the campsite was a blur of fear and self-recrimination. Twice, Michael slipped on the muddy trail, the second time twisting his wrist painfully as he caught himself. The pain was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. "Please be okay, Lily Pad. Please be okay." By the time he reached the campsite, the storm had intensified. Their tent had partially collapsed under the wind and rain. Michael quickly reinforced it, more out of mechanical habit than conscious thought. His mind was entirely focused on his daughter, out there somewhere in the tempest. While he waited, memories of Lily flooded his mind. Her first uncertain steps as a toddler, her hand tiny in his as they walked to her first day of kindergarten, the way she'd clung to him at Sarah's funeral, both of them adrift in grief. He remembered her resilience over the past 3 years, her determination to keep going, to find joy despite loss. The thought that he might lose her too was unbearable. Michael paced inside the tent, alternating between staring at his phone, willing it to ring with good news, and peering out at the storm, searching for headlights that would signal the arrival of the rescue team. The minutes stretched into an eternity of worry. He found himself bargaining with whatever higher power might be listening. "Take anything from me, take everything, just let her be safe. Let me find her. I can't lose her too." Michael had never considered himself a spiritual man, but in that moment, he found himself offering desperate prayers to anyone or anything that might be listening. He'd give anything to have his little girl back safe. The rain drummed relentlessly on the tent, a chaotic percussion that matched his racing heart. How long had she been missing now? How long could a 10-year-old survive in these conditions? The temperature was dropping rapidly as night approached. Without shelter, hypothermia would set in quickly. He tried to focus on Lily's resourcefulness. She knew basic survival skills. He'd made sure of that. She knew to find shelter, to stay put if lost, to conserve energy. She was smart and tough, his little warrior, but she was still just a child, alone in a storm that would challenge even the most experienced outdoorsman. 40 agonizing minutes later, headlights finally cut through the rain as 2 jeeps bearing the Park Service insignia pulled into the campground. 4 figures in rain gear approached, 3 men and a woman. Marsar Matthews? The woman extended her hand. I'm Ranger Kate Blackwood, Search and Rescue Coordinator. This is Ranger Tom Delgado, our tracking specialist, and Rangers Mike Hopper and James Running Bear. Michael shook their hands, noting the firm, capable grip of each. Thank you for coming so quickly. Can you show us on the map exactly where you last saw Lily? Ranger Blackwood asked, pulling out a topographical map protected in a clear waterproof case. Michael pointed to the ridge. We were here, about 2 miles up the eastern trail. I was setting up my camera equipment to photograph the wild Mustangs in the valley. Lily was exploring some rock formations maybe 30 yards away. I only took my eyes off her for a few minutes. Ranger Delgado studied the map. These ridges can be tricky. If she wandered off the main path, there are several steep slopes that could be treacherous in these conditions. She knows not to go near edges, Michael said quickly. She's very safety conscious. Kids get excited, especially when discovering new things, Ranger Running Bear said gently. And this fog can disorient even experienced hikers. What was she wearing again? Asked Ranger Hopper, making notes. Blue jacket, jeans, hiking boots, red backpack, Michael's voice caught. The jacket isn't very heavy. It was supposed to be a warm day. The Rangers exchanged glances that Michael immediately interpreted. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Hypothermia was a real concern. We need to move quickly, Ranger Blackwood said. Mr. Matthews, normally we'd ask you to stay here, but since you know the area where she was last seen, you'll come with Tom and me. Mike and James will coordinate with the other teams arriving soon and set up a command center here. Michael nodded gratefully. I'll get my gear. One more thing, Ranger Blackwood said. Does Lily have any medical conditions we should know about? Asthma? Allergies? No, she's healthy. But Michael hesitated, then decided they needed all the information. She's been through a lot. Her mother, my wife, died of cancer 3 years ago. Lily's been having nightmares recently, anxiety. Understanding dawned in the Ranger's eyes. This trip was important to both of you, wasn't it? Very, Michael whispered. It's our special time together. We'll find her, Mr. Matthews, Ranger Blackwood said with quiet confidence. Now grab whatever gear you need. We leave in 5 minutes. As Michael gathered fresh batteries for his flashlight and extra layers of clothing, his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. He forced himself to focus, to think clearly. Panic wouldn't help Lily. Each item he packed held a memory of previous camping trips with Lily. The Swiss Army knife she'd been so proud to learn to use, the compass they'd practiced navigating with, the emergency blankets he'd always insisted they carry just in case. How many times had they reviewed survival basics together? Find shelter, conserve heat, signal for help, stay put if lost. Please remember, Lily. Please remember what we practiced. As they prepared to head out, Ranger Running Bear approached Michael. There was something different about him. A quietness, a connection to the land that reminded Michael of the indigenous guides he'd worked with on photography assignments. The Mustangs, Running Bear said, his voice low. The ones you were photographing. They're the elk mountain herd? Yes, Michael replied. I've been documenting them for a wildlife magazine. Does that help? Running Bear's dark eyes were thoughtful. Maybe. That herd is special. The locals have stories about them. The lead mare especially, a chestnut with a blonde mane. They call her Citana, child mother. She lost her foal to mountain lions last spring, but has been seen watching over other foals in the herd. What are you saying? Michael asked. Just that there are forces out there beyond what we understand, the ranger replied. The horses know this mountain better than any of us. They know where shelter can be found, where water runs clean, where predators hunt. Under normal circumstances, Michael might have dismissed such talk, but nothing about this night was normal. If she found the horses, if the horses found her, Running Bear corrected softly, it might give her a chance. The conversation was interrupted by Ranger Blackwood, calling them to move out. As they headed back up the trail, the rain mercifully lessened, but the wind remained fierce and cold. Their powerful flashlights cut through the darkness, and occasionally Ranger Delgado would stop to examine something on the ground. A partial footprint, a disturbed rock. Michael was impressed by the tracker's ability to find signs in these conditions, but each passing minute without finding Lily felt like an eternity. There's a system moving in from the north, Ranger Blackwood said, checking a weather app on her phone. Temperature's going to drop into the 30s tonight. Snow possible at higher elevations? Michael felt sick. Lily's jacket wouldn't protect her in those temperatures. If she was injured or trapped somewhere exposed to the elements? Don't go there, Ranger Blackwood said, reading his expression. Kids are resilient. They surprise you. She's all I have, Michael said, his voice breaking. Then she has a father who won't give up, the ranger replied. That counts for a lot. The trail grew steeper, more rugged as they ascended. Michael's legs burned with effort, but he pushed on relentlessly, driven by the desperate need to find his daughter. Every dark shadow between the trees made his heart leap, hoping it might be Lily, then crashing with disappointment when it wasn't. Tell me about her, Ranger Blackwood suggested as they paused to catch their breath. What kind of girl is she? Michael's face softened slightly. She's remarkable. Brave. She had to grow up too fast after her mother died, but she still finds joy in things. She loves animals, horses especially. She draws constantly, fills sketchbooks with these amazingly detailed pictures. And she's so kind, always looking out for the new kids at school, standing up to bullies. Sounds like someone who knows how to handle herself, the ranger observed. She's the strongest person I know, Michael agreed, but she's still just a little girl, and she's afraid of the dark. Always has been. The thought of Lily alone in the pitch-black forest sent a fresh wave of anguish through him. They reached the ridge where Michael had been setting up his equipment. While Ranger Delgado searched for tracks, Ranger Blackwood coordinated with the other teams via radio. They were establishing a search grid, methodically covering the most likely areas where a child might wander or fall. I think I've got something, Ranger Delgado called out, kneeling by the edge of the ridge. Disturbed soil here, consistent with someone slipping. Michael rushed over, heart in his throat. The ranger's flashlight illuminated a steep slope leading down into a densely wooded valley. If she fell here, she could have slid quite a ways, Delgado said. But there's good news, it's not a sheer drop, more of a steep incline. Survivable, especially for someone small and light. We need to get down there, Michael said, already looking for a path. Carefully, Ranger Blackwood cautioned. The last thing Lily needs is for her rescue party to need rescuing. As they began to make their way down, using ropes for safety, Michael spotted a flash of color caught on a branch, a tiny scrap of blue fabric. Lily's jacket. Here, he called out, pointing. She definitely came this way. The discovery energized the search team. They moved more quickly now, confident they were on the right track. Michael scanned the forest floor with desperate intensity, looking for any sign of his daughter. Lily, he shouted periodically. Lily, can you hear me? Only the echoes of his own voice answered him, bouncing eerily off the rock faces surrounding the valley. The forest seemed to swallow his calls, deadening them in the dense vegetation. They reached the bottom of the slope and paused to reorient themselves. The valley spread out before them, a maze of trees, rocks, and underbrush. In daylight, it would be challenging to search thoroughly. In the dark, with limited visibility, it seemed almost impossible. We'll split up but stay within sight of each other's lights, Ranger Blackwood decided. Standard search pattern, 10 yards apart. Keep calling her name and listen for any response. For the next hour, they combed the valley systematically, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Every so often, they would stop to listen, hoping for some sound that would guide them to Lily. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a cold, clear night punctuated by occasional drips from the saturated foliage. Michael's throat grew raw from calling his daughter's name. His legs ached and his wrist throbbed where he'd twisted it earlier, but he pushed on relentlessly. The alternative, giving up, was unthinkable. Mr. Matthews, Ranger Blackwood said gently after they'd covered significant ground without success. We need to consider that she might have continued moving. Children often keep walking when they're lost, trying to find their way back. But if she's injured, Michael began. Then we'll find signs of that, Ranger Delgado assured him. I'm not seeing blood or evidence of someone dragging themselves. That's a good sign. As they regrouped to discuss their next move, a strange sound carried on the wind, the unmistakable whinny of a horse. The Mustangs, Michael said, his heart leaping. They're down in that valley. In this weather? Ranger Delgado looked skeptical. They usually head for higher ground during storms. Unless something's keeping them there, Ranger Blackwood said thoughtfully. For the first time since discovering Lily missing, Michael felt a spark of hope. He thought of what Ranger Running Bear had said about the mare they call Citana, child mother, a horse that had lost her foal. We need to find those horses, Michael said with sudden conviction. The sound came again, louder and more insistent than before. Not just a casual whinny, but almost a call, deliberate and demanding. Michael had been photographing wild horses long enough to recognize the difference. This wasn't normal behavior. It's coming from the eastern end of the valley, Ranger Delgado said, pointing. Maybe half a mile. Without waiting for the others, Michael began moving rapidly in that direction, flashlight beams sweeping the forest floor ahead of him. The rangers followed, exchanging looks of concern at his reckless pace. Nuts there were. Matthews, Ranger Blackwood called after him. We need to stay together. But Michael couldn't slow down now. Something was pulling him forward. A feeling, an instinct, a desperate hope that somehow his daughter and those horses were connected. They crossed a small stream, the water icy around their ankles. Under normal circumstances, Michael would have stopped to appreciate the beauty of the moonlight reflecting off the rippling surface. Now he barely noticed it, except as another obstacle between him and Lily. The forest began to thin, giving way to a small clearing ringed by rock formations. And there, in the silver moonlight that had broken through the departing storm clouds, was a sight that stopped Michael in his tracks. A herd of wild Mustangs stood in a semicircle around a rocky overhang. Their bodies were positioned as if forming a wall against the wind, and they remained unusually still, alert but not fleeing at the approach of humans as wild horses typically would. They're protecting something, Ranger Delgado whispered. Or someone. Lily, Michael shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Lily, are you there? The horses shifted nervously at his volume but did not scatter. And then from behind their protective formation came a sound that Michael had feared he might never hear again. A small, weak voice calling back, Dad? Dad, is that you? Michael's world narrowed to that single voice. He moved forward, heedless of the wild horses, focused solely on reaching his daughter. The Mustangs parted slightly, still wary, but somehow sensing his purpose. And there she was, huddled against the rock face, wrapped in her emergency blanket, looking pale and exhausted, but blessedly, miraculously alive. Lily, he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. Oh God, Lily. Dad, she whispered, reaching for him with trembling hands. I knew you'd find me. The horses, they kept me warm. All night. They protected me. Michael gathered her gently into his arms, feeling her small body shivering against his. He wrapped her more securely in the blanket, adding his own jacket for extra warmth. Are you hurt? He asked, scanning her for injuries. My ankle, Lily said, wincing. I fell down the hill. I couldn't walk very far. Ranger Blackwood knelt beside them, her medical training taking over. Let me check her vitals, she said, pulling equipment from her pack. As the ranger examined Lily, Michael became aware of a presence behind him. He turned to find himself face to face with a magnificent chestnut mare, her blonde mane ghostly in the moonlight. She stood watching them intently, neither fleeing nor approaching, her intelligent eyes fixed on Lily. That's Citana, Lily said weakly. She found me first. She's been taking care of me. Michael looked into the mare's eyes and saw something he couldn't explain. A wisdom, an understanding that went beyond animal instinct. Thank you, he whispered to the horse, feeling both foolish and profoundly grateful. The mare nickered softly, as if in response, then backed away slowly to rejoin her herd. She's showing signs of mild hypothermia, Ranger Blackwood reported, but her core temperature is better than I would have expected given the conditions. The horses really did help keep her warm. She shook her head in amazement. I've never seen anything like it. We need to get her to medical care, Ranger Delgado said, already radioing their position to the base camp. The terrain's too rough for a stretcher. We'll have to carry her. I'll carry her, Michael said immediately, his tone brooking no argument. He turned to his daughter. Ready for a piggyback ride, Lily Pad? Like when you were little? Lily nodded, managing a small smile despite her exhaustion. As Michael carefully lifted her onto his back, she whispered close to his ear, Dad, we have to help them too. The horses. They saved me. We will, he promised, not yet knowing how he would keep that pledge, but feeling its weight and importance nonetheless. We will. As they prepared to leave, the wild Mustangs began to drift away, their mission apparently complete now that the humans had arrived. Only Citana remained, watching as Michael adjusted Lily's weight on his back. Goodbye, Lily called weakly to the mare. Thank you. Citana tossed her head, blonde mane catching the moonlight, then turned and cantered away to join her herd, her form gradually disappearing into the shadowy forest. The journey back would be long and difficult, but with each step carrying his daughter to safety, Michael felt a profound sense of gratitude unlike anything he'd experienced before. Not just for finding Lily alive, but for the mysterious intervention of the wild creatures who had defied their nature to protect a lost human child. As they made their careful way back up the slope, guided by the ranger's expertise, Lily's head rested heavily on Michael's shoulder, her breathing growing more regular as she drifted in and out of sleep, secure in her father's arms at last. "Dad?" she murmured at one point. "Yes, Lilypad. I knew you wouldn't give up looking for me." "Never," he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. "Not ever." Above them, the storm clouds had fully cleared, revealing a tapestry of stars spanning the vast Colorado sky. Somewhere in the valley below, the hoofbeats of the wild Mustangs echoed as they returned to their ancient patterns, their extraordinary act of compassion already becoming the stuff of legend, a story that would change not only Lily and Michael's lives, but the fate of the entire herd. As dawn broke on the horizon, painting the eastern sky with tentative fingers of pink and gold, Michael carried his precious burden toward the waiting rescue vehicles, each step taking them closer to safety and to the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that would inexorably link them to the wild horses of Elk Mountain and the remarkable mare they called Citana. "Let's move," he said, his renewed determination cutting through the fear. "My daughter is down there. I can feel it." As they descended into the dark valley, they had no way of knowing that less than a mile away, surrounded by the wild Mustangs of Elk Mountain, Lily Matthews was fighting for her life, and that the bonds forming between the lost girl and these magnificent creatures would change everything. Lily awoke to the gentle nudging of a warm muzzle against her cheek. For a moment, disoriented and half frozen, she thought she was back in her bedroom with her cat Whiskers, waking her for school. But as consciousness fully returned, the events of the previous evening came rushing back. The storm, the fall, her injured ankle, and most incredibly, the wild horses that had surrounded her during the night. Dawn was breaking, painting the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold. The storm had passed, but it had left behind a world transformed by ice. Every branch, every blade of grass glittered in the early morning light. Under different circumstances, it would have been breathtakingly beautiful. The chestnut mare with the blonde mane, the one Lily had started thinking of as Goldie, still lay beside her, a living furnace that had kept her from freezing during the night. The other horses had maintained their protective circle, their bodies creating a barrier against the biting wind. "Thank you," Lily whispered to Goldie, her voice raspy from the cold. She reached out a trembling hand to stroke the mare's neck. The horse snorted softly in response, dark eyes regarding Lily with what seemed like genuine concern. Lily tried to move and gasped as pain shot through her ankle. It was swollen to twice its normal size, mottled with purple bruises. She wouldn't be walking out of here, at least not without help. Where was her father? Had he been searching all night? Was he safe? Questions tumbled through her mind, each more worrying than the last. Michael Matthews was the most resourceful person Lily knew, but even he had limits. What if he'd been injured too? What if he couldn't find her? The thought of her father searching desperately through the storm made Lily's eyes sting with tears. Since losing her mother, she and her dad had become a team, the dynamic duo, he called them. They had their own private jokes, traditions, and ways of supporting each other through the hard days. The thought of him out there, frantic with worry, was almost worse than her own predicament. Her stomach growled fiercely, reminding her that it had been nearly 24 hours since she'd last eaten. She reached for her small red backpack, relieved to find it still slung across her shoulders. With numb fingers, she unzipped it and took inventory. A half-empty water bottle, now partially frozen, a crushed granola bar, a small first aid kit, her sketchbook and pencils, and a thin emergency blanket her father had insisted she always carry. "Better than nothing," she murmured, unwrapping the granola bar with shaking hands. She broke it in half, saving part for later. Who knew how long she'd be out here? As she nibbled slowly, savoring each morsel, Goldie rose to her feet in a fluid motion. The other horses followed suit, shaking their manes and pawing at the ground. For a terrible moment, Lily thought they were about to leave her. "Please don't go," she said, unable to keep the fear from her voice. Goldie turned to look at her, then took a few steps toward a nearby stream that ran beside the rocky overhang. The water flowed clear and fresh, having washed away the debris from the storm. The mare dipped her head and drank, then looked back at Lily meaningfully. "You want me to drink too?" Lily asked, understanding dawning. She dragged herself toward the stream, wincing with each movement. The pain in her ankle was excruciating, but the promise of fresh water was too tempting to resist. When she reached the stream's edge, she cupped her hands and drank greedily. The water was ice cold and delicious, instantly reviving her. She splashed some on her face, then refilled her water bottle. "What now?" she asked, looking up at Goldie. The mare stamped impatiently, then lowered herself to the ground again, this time right beside the stream. The message was clear: stay put, rest. It was good advice. Lily knew from her father's wilderness training that if you were lost, the worst thing you could do was wander aimlessly. Better to stay in one place, conserve energy, and make yourself visible to rescuers. She carefully unfolded the emergency blanket, its reflective silver surface catching the morning light. It wasn't much, but wrapped around her shoulders, it provided a thin barrier against the cold. More importantly, its shiny surface might catch the eye of a search plane or helicopter. As the sun climbed higher, its warmth began to penetrate the frozen landscape. Lily watched in fascination as the wild horses grazed nearby, never straying far from her. They moved with such grace and purpose, communicating with subtle ear flicks and body language. Occasionally, one would raise its head suddenly, alert to some sound or scent Lily couldn't detect. Before returning to grazing, the horse's presence gave Lily time to think. Her father had always told her that survival depended as much on mental attitude as physical preparation. "Your mind is your strongest tool," he'd say. "Keep it sharp when everything else fails." Lily pulled out her sketchbook and pencil. Drawing had always been her refuge, especially after her mother died. When words failed her, pictures flowed. With light, careful strokes, she began to sketch Goldie, the proud arch of her neck, the intelligent eyes, the flowing mane that gave her nickname. As she drew, a plan began to form. The horses clearly knew this territory. They knew where to find water, where to shelter, where the best grazing could be found. And most importantly, they seemed to have accepted her into their herd, at least temporarily. But horses were prey animals. Their instinct was to flee from danger, like humans with rescue equipment or the sounds of helicopters. If rescuers came, would the horses bolt? Would Lily lose her only source of warmth and protection? A soft nickering sound interrupted her thoughts. Goldie had approached again and was examining Lily's drawing with apparent interest. "That's you," Lily said, holding up the sketchbook. See? You're beautiful." The mare snorted, her breath warm against Lily's cold face. Then, to Lily's astonishment, Goldie gently took the edge of the emergency blanket in her teeth and tugged it higher around Lily's shoulders, as if tucking her in. "How do you know to do that?" Lily whispered, awestruck. "How do you know I need help?" A memory surfaced. A documentary she and her father had watched about wild horses. The narrator had explained how mares cared for their foals, teaching them, protecting them. Hadn't her father mentioned something about this particular herd? Something about a mare who had lost her foal? Looking into Goldie's deep brown eyes, Lily felt a connection that transcended species. This magnificent creature had suffered a loss, just as Lily had. Perhaps that shared experience had created a bond between them, a recognition of pain and of resilience. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" Lily said softly, reaching up to stroke the mare's muzzle. "I know how that feels." Goldie lowered her head, allowing the touch. For a moment, girl and horse remained that way, connected by touch and by a grief that needed no words. The moment was broken by a distant sound, so faint that at first Lily thought she'd imagined it. But Goldie's head shot up, ears pricked forward intently. The other horses likewise froze, alert and listening. There it was again, the faint but unmistakable call of a human voice carried on the wind. "Dad!" Lily screamed with all her might. "I'm here! Dad!" She tried to stand, forgetting her injured ankle, and immediately crumpled back to the ground with a cry of pain. The sudden movement startled the horses, who backed away nervously. "No, please," Lily begged, tears springing to her eyes. "Don't leave me. Not now." To her immense relief, the horses settled, though they remained watchful. Goldie approached Lily again, nudging her as if encouraging her to keep calling out. Lily drew a deep breath and shouted again, this time cupping her hands around her mouth to project the sound. "Help! I'm down here." No response came. Had she imagined the voice? Was her mind playing tricks on her? She was about to call out again when Goldie suddenly turned toward the forest, ears forward, body tense. The mare released a loud, piercing whinny that echoed through the valley, similar to the call she had made during the night. One by one, the other horses joined in, creating a chorus that surely could be heard for miles. "Smart girl," Lily whispered admiringly. "You're calling them to us." As the echoes of the horses' calls faded, a new sound emerged, closer this time, and unmistakably human. "Lily," it was her father's voice. "Dad," she screamed back, her heart pounding with sudden hope. "Dad, I'm here!" The horses shifted nervously at her volume, but didn't flee. Instead, incredibly, Goldie lifted her head and whinnied again, as if adding her own voice to Lily's call. Minutes that felt like hours passed as Lily strained to hear a response. Then suddenly, crashing sounds came from the forest. The noise of someone moving rapidly through underbrush. "Lily! Here, Dad! I'm over here!" And then he was there, emerging from the trees with two uniformed rangers behind him. Michael Matthews looked haggard, his clothes torn and muddy, his face lined with exhaustion and worry. But when he saw his daughter, alive and surrounded by wild horses, his expression transformed into one of pure joy and disbelief. "Lily," he breathed, taking a step forward. The horses shifted nervously at the approach of strangers. Goldie positioned herself protectively between Lily and the newcomers, pawing the ground warningly. "Dad, wait," Lily called. "Don't come closer yet. You'll scare them away." "Mr. Matthews," one of the rangers. "A woman," said quietly, placing a restraining hand on Michael's arm. "She's right. Those are wild animals protecting her. We need to approach cautiously." "Lily, are you hurt?" Michael called, his voice tight with the effort of restraining himself from rushing to his daughter. "My ankle," Lily replied. "I think it's sprained or broken. I can't walk. But I'm okay, Dad. The horses, they kept me warm all night. They saved me." Even from a distance, she could see her father's eyes widen in amazement as he took in the scene. His daughter, wrapped in an emergency blanket, surrounded by a herd of wild Mustangs that showed no signs of fleeing. "The Mare," said the male ranger, his voice filled with wonder. "The one standing guard over her. That's Citana, the one the local tribes talk about." "Child mother," the female ranger translated softly. Goldie, or Citana apparently, maintained her protective stance, watching the humans warily. Lily reached up and placed a gentle hand on the horse's leg. "It's okay," she said soothingly. "That's my dad. He won't hurt us." Michael slowly sank to his knees, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Lily Pad," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "My brave, amazing girl." Something in his voice, in his posture, seemed to reassure the mare. She relaxed slightly, though she remained vigilant. "The horses might let you approach if you come slowly," the male ranger advised Michael. "One person only, moving calmly." Michael nodded and began to inch forward, speaking softly as he did. "I'm not going to hurt you or your new friend," he told the mare. "I just want to help my daughter, the same way you've been helping her." Lily watched, holding her breath, as her father slowly closed the distance. Goldie's ears flicked back and forth, but she stood her ground. "That's it," Michael continued in the same gentle tone he used when approaching skittish wildlife for his photography. "You've done an amazing job looking after her. Thank you for that. I'll take care of her now." When he was just a few feet away, Goldie snorted and pawed the ground once more, but it seemed more like a token protest than a genuine threat. Then remarkably, she stepped aside, creating a path between father and daughter. Michael rushed the final distance and gathered Lily into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She didn't mind. The familiar smell of him, pine needles and coffee and the faint hint of his shaving cream, was the most wonderful thing she'd ever experienced. "I thought I had lost you," he whispered against her hair, his voice raw. "I knew you'd find me," Lily replied, her own tears flowing freely now. "The horses helped me stay alive until you could." Michael pulled back slightly to look at the magnificent animals still surrounding them. "I can't believe they stayed with you like this. Wild horses usually avoid humans at all costs. The mare, Citana, she acted like she was protecting me. Like I was..." Lily hesitated, then finished in a whisper. "Like I was her baby." The female ranger had approached cautiously and now knelt beside them. "I'm Ranger Blackwood. That ankle looks pretty swollen. Let me take a look." As the ranger gently examined Lily's injury, Michael kept one arm around his daughter's shoulders, unwilling to break contact for even a moment. The other horses had begun to drift away, grazing nearby but maintaining some distance from the humans. Only Citana remained close, watching the proceedings with what seemed like genuine concern. "Definitely a bad sprain, possibly a fracture," Ranger Blackwood pronounced. "We need to get you to a hospital for x-rays. Can you help me splint it, Mr. Matthews?" As Michael and the ranger worked to stabilize Lily's ankle with supplies from the first aid kit, Lily kept her eyes on Citana. The mare hadn't moved, her gaze fixed on Lily as if ensuring the humans weren't causing further harm. "She's extraordinary," said the male ranger, who had introduced himself as Ranger Delgado. "I've been tracking the elk mountain herd for years, but I've never seen them behave like this with humans." "She lost her foal last spring," Lily said, remembering what she had intuited earlier. At least I think she did. Is that right? Ranger Delgado looked surprised. Yes, mountain lion attack. The locals said she called for her foal for days afterward. How did you know? Lily shrugged, wincing as the movement jostled her ankle. I could just tell. We both lost someone we love. Maybe that's why she helped me. The splinting complete, the next challenge was transporting Lily out of the valley. The terrain was too rough for a stretcher, and a helicopter couldn't land in the densely wooded area. I'll carry her, Michael said immediately. It's nearly 2 miles back to the trail where we can meet the medical team, Ranger Blackwood cautioned. That's a long way to carry someone, even a child. I'd carry her twice that distance, Michael replied with quiet determination. As they prepared to leave, Lily felt a wave of sadness at the thought of saying goodbye to Citana. The mare had saved her life, there was no doubt about that. Without the horse's body heat during the freezing night, hypothermia would have claimed her. Thank you, she said to the mare, reaching out to stroke her muzzle one last time. Citana snorted softly, then to everyone's amazement, lowered herself to the ground beside Lily. What's she doing? Michael asked, confused. Ranger Delgado shook his head in disbelief. It almost looks like she's offering to carry the girl. That's impossible, Ranger Blackwood protested. She's wild, unbroken, but Lily understood immediately. She'd felt this connection building all night, this unlikely bond between a grieving child and a mourning mare. Without hesitation, she said, she wants to help me, just like she's been helping me all along. Lily, we can't let you ride a wild horse, Michael began. Dad, please, Lily interrupted. She won't hurt me. I know it. The adults exchanged uncertain glances. It was an outlandish suggestion, allowing a child with an injured ankle to ride bareback on a wild Mustang. And yet they had all witnessed the extraordinary protection the mare had provided through the night. If she makes any sudden moves, I'll be right beside you, Michael finally conceded. At the first sign of trouble, I'm pulling you off. Agreed? Lily nodded eagerly. With her father's help, she carefully maneuvered onto Citana's back, being mindful of her injured ankle. The mare remained perfectly still during the process, as if understanding the need for care. Once Lily was securely positioned, her hands buried in Citana's blonde mane for stability, the mare rose smoothly to her feet. Lily swayed slightly, then found her balance. It felt both terrifying and completely natural to be on the back of this wild creature, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. Take it slow, Michael cautioned, one hand hovering near Lily's back as Citana began to walk forward. The mare picked her path carefully, seeming to understand the precious cargo she carried. The other horses had gathered again, forming a loose escort as they moved toward the forest. Ranger Delgado led the way, while Ranger Blackwood brought up the rear, both still visibly stunned by the turn of events. This is something I'll be telling my grandchildren about, Ranger Blackwood murmured. As they made their slow, careful journey through the valley and up toward the main trail, Lily leaned forward and whispered into Citana's ear. You're the most amazing horse in the world. I'll never forget you. The mare's ear flicked back at the sound of Lily's voice, and she nickered softly in response. Behind them, Michael watched with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and lingering concern as his daughter rode confidently on the back of a wild Mustang. A Mustang that had, against all odds and instincts, chosen to protect a lost human child. In that moment, something shifted in Michael's understanding of the world. As a wildlife photographer, he had always respected the beauty and intelligence of animals. But what he was witnessing went beyond instinct or learned behavior. This was something deeper, a connection that transcended the usual boundaries between species. What had Ranger Running Bear said back at the camp? There are forces out there beyond what we understand. As they reached the edge of the forest, sunlight filtered through the pines, illuminating Lily and Citana in a warm golden glow. Michael reached for his camera before remembering he'd left his equipment back at the ridge. But perhaps that was fitting. Some moments couldn't be captured on film. They had to be experienced, felt, remembered in the heart. This was one of those moments. Whatever happened next, Michael knew that none of them would ever be quite the same again. Word of Lily's extraordinary rescue spread quickly through the small mountain community. By the time Michael's truck pulled into the parking lot of Silver Creek Regional Hospital, a small crowd had gathered. Park rangers, local news reporters, and curious onlookers drawn by rumors of a wild horse that had saved a child's life. Michael ignored them all, focusing solely on getting his daughter the medical attention she needed. The emergency room staff whisked Lily away for x-rays and treatment, leaving Michael to deal with the paperwork and questions. Mr. Matthews, I'm Dr. Harrison, a kind-faced woman in her 50s approached, clipboard in hand. Your daughter is being examined now. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair, suddenly aware of how he must look. Unshaven, clothes filthy from the search, eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and spent adrenaline. She got separated from me during the storm yesterday afternoon, he explained, his voice hoarse. She fell down a slope and injured her ankle. She was missing overnight in freezing temperatures. Doctor, Harrison's eyebrows rose. Overnight? In that storm? That's concerning. We'll need to check for hypothermia, frostbite, and exposure. She was protected, Michael said, knowing how strange it would sound. A herd of wild horses surrounded her, kept her warm through the night. To her credit, Doctor, Harrison didn't dismiss the story outright. I've heard something about that from the paramedics. Quite remarkable if true. It's true, Michael said firmly. I saw it with my own eyes. The lead mare even carried Lily part of the way back to the trail. They had to tranquilize her when we reached the medical team. Lily was devastated about that, but Ranger Blackwood promised they'd release the mare back to her herd once they removed the tranquilizer dart. Doctor, Harrison made some notes, then said, well, whatever happened out there, your daughter is one lucky little girl. I'll let you know as soon as the x-rays are done. Left alone in the waiting room, Michael finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. The terror of realizing Lily was missing, the desperate search through the storm, the incredible sight of his daughter surrounded by wild Mustangs, and the even more incredible journey out of the valley on horseback. It was like something from a fairy tale, not real life, and yet it had happened. His phone buzzed with missed calls and messages. Colleagues from the magazine wanting updates. Lily's school inquiring about her absence. Neighbors offering help. Michael responded to the most urgent ones and was about to call Janet, Lily's maternal grandmother, when a new text came through from an unknown number. Mr. Matthews, this is Ranger Running Bear. Need to speak with you about the horses. Urgent matter. Please call when you can. Michael frowned. What could be urgent about the horses now? Lily was safe, and the Rangers had promised to release Citana back to her herd. Still, Running Bear had been the one to mention the special nature of the Elk Mountain Mustangs. Perhaps there was more to the story. He dialed the number. Mr. Matthews, thank you for calling back. Running Bear answered immediately. How is your daughter? Being examined now. They're taking x-rays of her ankle. What's this urgent matter about the horses? There was a pause, then Running Bear said, I'm afraid there's a complication. Are you aware of the Bureau of Land Management's Wild Horse Management Program? Vaguely, Michael replied. Something about population control? Yes. The BLM conducts periodic roundups of wild horses they deem excess to prevent overgrazing on public lands. These horses are placed in holding facilities for adoption. A sense of foreboding crept over Michael. And this is relevant because the Elk Mountain herd is scheduled for a roundup next week, including Citana and the horses that protected your daughter. Michael sat up straighter. They can't do that. Not after what those horses did. I'm afraid they can and will. The roundup has been planned for months. The paperwork is all in order. But these aren't just any wild horses, Michael protested. They saved a human life. That has to count for something. It should, Running Bear agreed. But bureaucracy doesn't always recognize exceptional circumstances. There's more though. This herd is special for other reasons too. They're part of a rare bloodline that traces back to the original Spanish Mustangs brought to America in the 1500s. Genetic testing has confirmed it. They're living history, Mr. Matthews. Michael rubbed his temples, feeling a headache brewing. Why are you telling me this, Ranger Running Bear? What can I possibly do about a government roundup? Because you're a wildlife photographer with connections to major publications. And because your daughter formed a bond with Citana that defies explanation. If anyone can help protect these horses, it's you. Before Michael could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Matthews, your daughter is asking for you. I have to go, Michael told Running Bear. Let me think about this. I'll call you back. He found Lily in a treatment room, her ankle freshly bandaged and propped up on pillows. Her face was still pale, but some of the spark had returned to her blue eyes. Dad, she exclaimed when she saw him. The doctor says it's just a bad sprain. No broken bones. And I don't have hypothermia, Michael supplied, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and taking her hand. That's great news, Lilypad. You were very lucky. Not lucky, Lily corrected. Protected. Citana protected me. Her expression clouded. Is she okay? Did they let her go back to her family? Michael hesitated, unsure how much to share about his conversation with Running Bear. Lily had been through enough trauma already, but he'd made a promise to himself after her mother died. No more sugarcoating difficult truths. Children deserved honesty, even when it was painful. The Rangers are taking care of her, he said carefully. But there's something we need to talk about. The government agency that manages wild horses has scheduled a roundup of the Elk Mountain herd. They plan to capture the horses and put them in holding facilities. Lily's eyes widened in horror. Capture? You mean like in pens? Citana too? Michael nodded grimly. Apparently it's routine population management. They do it to prevent overgrazing. But they can't, Lily cried, sitting up so quickly she winced as her ankle shifted. Those horses saved my life. And Citana, she belongs in the wild with her herd. She'd die in a pen, Dad. She would. I know, sweetheart. Ranger Running Bear thinks we might be able to help, but I'm not sure how. These are government decisions made by officials far away. Lily grabbed his arm with surprising strength. We have to try. You always tell me that when something matters, you have to stand up for it, even when it's hard. These horses matter, Dad. They matter to me. Michael looked into his daughter's eyes so like her mother's, full of passion and determination, and knew he couldn't refuse. Sarah had been the same way, fighting for causes she believed in right up until the end. That fire lived on in their daughter. Okay, he agreed. We'll try, but first you need to rest and recover. Doctor's orders. Lily settled back against the pillows, but her mind was clearly racing. We need a plan and evidence. Your photos might help, but we need more. What kind of evidence? Stories. Other people must know about these horses, about how special they are. And scientific stuff. Ranger Running Bear mentioned something about their bloodline, right? Michael smiled despite himself. His daughter's quick mind never ceased to amaze him. Yes, apparently they're descendants of the original Spanish horses brought to America centuries ago. Genetic testing confirmed it. See? That's important. If they're rare, they should be protected, not rounded up and put in pens. Lily's face suddenly lit up. Dad, what about your magazine? Couldn't they do a story about the horses? About what happened to me? The idea had merit. Michael worked regularly for Wildlife Wonders, a prestigious nature magazine with a substantial readership and influence in conservation circles. A featured article about the Elk Mountain Mustangs, combined with the dramatic story of Lily's rescue, might generate enough public interest to reconsider the roundup. It's possible, he said thoughtfully. I'd need to pitch it to my editor, gather more information, take more photographs. Then let's do it. As soon as they let me out of here. Michael laughed and ruffled her hair. Slow down, Tiger. You're not going anywhere until the doctor says so. And even then, you'll need to take it easy on that ankle. A knock on the door interrupted them. Dr. Harrison entered, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in a dark suit. Mr. Matthews, this is Miss Reynolds from Child Protective Services, Dr. Harrison said, her expression carefully neutral. She'd like to ask you and Lily some questions. Michael's stomach dropped. CPS? Why would they be involved? Mare. Reynolds stepped forward, her face professionally blank. Mr. Matthews, we routinely follow up on cases involving children who experience potentially dangerous situations. I understand your daughter was lost overnight during a severe storm? Yes, but I've explained everything to the rangers and medical staff, Michael replied, trying to keep the defensiveness from his voice. It was an accident. The storm came in much faster than forecast. Of course, Ms. Reynolds said, making a note on her tablet. And you were taking photographs at the time? Wildlife photography. It's my profession. The implication behind her question was clear. Had he been paying attention to his work instead of his child? Dad didn't do anything wrong, Lily interjected fiercely. I wandered too far looking at fossils. He told me to stay close, but I got distracted. Ms. Reynolds offered Lily a tight smile. I'm sure your father is very caring, dear. We just need to understand exactly what happened. She turned back to Michael. I understand you're a single parent. The child's mother is deceased? Yes, Michael said stiffly. My wife, Sarah, passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. That must be very difficult for both of you, Ms. Reynolds said, her tone softening slightly. Do you have any other family support? Grandparents? Siblings? My mother-in-law lives about an hour away. She helps out when I'm on longer assignments. And how often are you away for work, Mr. Matthews? Michael felt a flare of anger. Was she suggesting he wasn't present enough for Lily? That he was neglecting his responsibilities as a father? I arrange my schedule around Lily's school and activities, he said carefully. Most of my shoots are local or on weekends. When I do travel for longer assignments, which is maybe 3 or 4 times a year, Lily stays with her grandmother. And this camping trip, was it planned as a photography assignment or family time? Both, Michael admitted. I was on assignment to photograph the wild Mustangs, but it was also our annual father-daughter camping trip. We've done it since Lily was 7. Mizzy is. Reynolds made another note. And you were aware of the forecast for severe weather? Before Michael could answer, Dr. Harrison intervened. I think that's enough questions for now. Lily needs rest, and I'm sure Mr. Matthews could use some too. Perhaps we could continue this later, Ms. Reynolds hesitated, then nodded. Of course. Mr. Matthews, I'll need to schedule a home visit in the next few days to complete my assessment. After she left, Michael released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Doctor, Harrison gave him a sympathetic look. Try not to worry too much, she advised. It's standard procedure in cases like this. From what I can see, you're a devoted father who experienced a scary accident. It happens. But Michael couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had settled over him. Could he actually lose custody of Lily because of this? The very thought was unbearable. Dad? Lily's small voice broke through his spiral of worry. Are we in trouble? Michael forced a reassuring smile. No, Lilypad. It's just grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. But Lily was too perceptive to be fooled. That lady thinks you did something wrong, doesn't she? That's not fair. You're the best dad ever. Michael sat beside her and pulled her into a gentle hug, careful of her ankle. Everything's going to be fine. I promise. It was a promise he wasn't entirely sure he could keep, but he would do everything in his power to make it true. Lily had already lost one parent. He would not let her lose another. A soft knock at the door revealed Ranger Blackwood. She entered hesitantly. Sorry to intrude. I wanted to check on Lily and update you both about Citana. Lily immediately perked up. Is she okay? Did you let her go back to her family? Ranger Blackwood pulled up a chair. She's fine. The tranquilizer has worn off, and she's currently in a temporary holding pen at our station. We'll release her tomorrow morning. Can I be there? Lily asked eagerly. When you let her go, Ranger Blackwood glanced at Michael, who shrugged. That's up to the doctors, sweetheart. If they release you in time. Actually, the ranger said, that's partly why I'm here. Ranger Running Bear mentioned he spoke with you about the planned roundup. Michael nodded. He did. Lily and I were just discussing ways we might be able to help prevent it. I thought you might feel that way. Ranger Blackwood reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. This is all the information we have on the elk mountain herd. Population counts, grazing patterns, genetic testing results. There's also contact information for the BLM officials in charge of the roundup decision. You're helping us? Michael asked in surprise. Ranger Blackwood's expression turned serious. Officially, I can't take a position on BLM decisions. But unofficially, she looked at Lily, I've worked with wildlife for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what those horses did for you. Some things just feel wrong to ignore. Lily beamed at her. Thank you. We're going to save them, I know it. One more thing, Ranger Blackwood added. There's a local rancher named Elena Vasquez. She runs a wild horse sanctuary about 30 miles from here. If anyone knows how to navigate the bureaucracy around wild horse protection, it's her. I've included her contact information in the folder. After the ranger left, Lily's excitement was palpable. See, wow, Dad, we're not alone. We can do this. Michael thumbed through the folder, impressed by the thoroughness of the information. Perhaps there was hope after all. First things first, he said. You need to rest and heal. Then we'll figure out our next steps. But the roundup is next week, Lily protested. We don't have much time. I know, and I promise we'll do everything we can. But I need you healthy, okay? No adventures until that ankle is better. Lily reluctantly agreed, settling back against the pillows. Soon, exhaustion overcame her excitement, and she drifted off to sleep. Michael watched his daughter's peaceful face, her long eyelashes casting shadows on her cheeks, and felt a familiar ache in his chest. Sarah should be here for this, for their brave, compassionate girl who formed bonds with wild horses and fought for what she believed in. He could almost hear what his wife would say. Don't you dare let those bureaucrats win, Michael. Not when Lily's heart is on the line. He pulled out his phone and dialed his editor's number. Simon, it's Michael Matthews. I have the story of a lifetime for you. It involves wild Mustangs, my daughter, and a government roundup we need to stop. Are you interested? Simon's enthusiastic response confirmed what Michael already knew. This was a story worth telling. But as he glanced at the business card Ms. Reynolds had left, another reality loomed. He wasn't just fighting to save a herd of wild horses now. He might also be fighting to keep his family together. And that was a fight he absolutely could not lose. As darkness fell outside the hospital window, Michael made a silent vow to both the sleeping child beside him and the wild mare who had saved her. I will protect what matters, whatever it takes. In the mountains miles away, under a canopy of stars, the rest of the Elk Mountain herd grazed peacefully, unaware of the human forces gathering that would determine their fate. Their lead mare was missing, but they continued their ancient patterns, moving across landscapes their ancestors had traversed for centuries. They couldn't know that a battle was brewing, a battle in which their unlikely bond with a 10-year-old girl might be their only chance for freedom. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. While Lily recuperated at home, her ankle elevated and wrapped in an elastic bandage, Michael threw himself into action. The living room of their modest mountain home had been transformed into what Lily called Operation Mustang Headquarters, with maps, documents, and Michael's laptop constantly open to research. "Dad, look at this," Lily called from the couch where she was stationed with her own laptop. "I found an article about another herd that got protection because of their rare genetics. We could use that as a precedent." Michael smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm and growing vocabulary. She'd been devouring information about wild horse conservation with remarkable focus for a 10-year-old. Her passion was infectious, and Michael found himself more determined with each passing hour. He had already published a preliminary article online through Wildlife Wonders magazine's website, including several of his previous photographs of the Elk Mountain herd. The piece had gone viral, shared thousands of times on social media, with comments pouring in from around the world. People were captivated by the story of wild horses saving a lost child. But viral attention wasn't enough. They needed legal grounds to stop the roundup, which was now just 4 days away. The doorbell rang, interrupting Michael's thoughts. He opened the door to find a striking woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her weathered face spoke of years spent outdoors, and her handshake was firm and confident. "Elena Vasquez," she introduced herself. "Ranger Blackwood said you could use some help." "Michael Matthews." "Please come in," he said gratefully. "This is my daughter, Lily." Lily waved enthusiastically from the couch. "You're the horse sanctuary lady. Do you really have 50 wild Mustangs?" Elena laughed, setting down a heavy leather satchel. 63 at last count, though 2 mares are about to foal, so we'll be at 65 soon. "You must be the girl who made friends with Citana." "You know her name?" Lily asked, delighted. "I know all the horses in the Elk Mountain herd," Elena confirmed, settling into an armchair. "I've been monitoring them for years. Citana is special, a true lead mare with exceptional intelligence. What she did for you doesn't surprise me, though it is extraordinary." Michael offered coffee, which Elena accepted gratefully. "We've been researching everything we can about stopping the roundup," he explained, "but we're running into bureaucratic walls at every turn." Elena nodded grimly. "Welcome to the world of wild horse advocacy. The BLM operates under the 1971 Wild Free-Roaming Horses and Burros Act, which paradoxically both protects wild horses and allows for their removal from public lands." "How can a law do both?" Lily asked, frowning. "Good question," Elena replied. "The act protects them from harassment and slaughter, but it also requires the BLM to maintain a thriving natural ecological balance on public lands. They interpret that to mean removing horses when they decide there are too many for the land to support." "And who decides what too many mean?" Michael asked. "Therein lies the problem. The BLM sets what they call appropriate management levels, ANMLs, for each herd management area. But these numbers often favor cattle grazing interests over the horses. Ranchers who lease public lands for their cattle want fewer wild horses competing for forage." Michael absorbed this information, recognizing the familiar tension between conservation and economic interests. "So what's our best angle to stop this particular roundup?" Elena reached into her satchel and pulled out a thick file. "I've been preparing for this fight for months, ever since I heard the Elk Mountain herd was on the schedule. The genetic testing is our strongest argument. These horses carry rare Spanish colonial bloodlines that should be preserved for biodiversity." "My article mentioned that," Michael noted, "but I didn't have the detailed genetic data." "I do," Elena said, spreading out several documents on the coffee table. These horses are living history. Their ancestors came with the conquistadors in the 1500s. Most wild horses in America today are mixed with domestic breeds, but the elk mountain herd has remained relatively isolated, preserving those ancient bloodlines. And Citana? Lily asked eagerly. Is she special too? Elena's expression softened. Citana is perhaps the purest example in the herd. Her mitochondrial DNA shows direct descent from Spanish barbs, brought over on Columbus's second voyage. That's amazing, Lily exclaimed. So she's like a living fossil. In a way, Elena agreed with a smile. But these horses aren't just genetically valuable. They're also behaviorally unique. The way they've adapted to this specific mountain environment over centuries, their social structures, their knowledge of water sources and seasonal migration patterns, all of that would be lost if they're rounded up. Michael nodded, his photographer's mind already visualizing how to capture these aspects visually. My editor wants a full feature article with new photographs for next month's issue, but we don't have that kind of time. The roundup is scheduled for Monday, which is why I brought this, Elena said, pulling out a legal document. It's a petition for an emergency injunction to halt the roundup pending further review. I've been working with a conservation attorney, but we need more signatures from local stakeholders and scientific experts to make it compelling. Hope surged in Michael's chest. What can we do to help? Your article and photographs have already generated public interest, which helps tremendously. But we need local support too. The BLM is sensitive to community opinion, especially in an election year. We could have a community meeting, Lily suggested. Invite everyone who cares about the horses. Elena looked impressed. That's actually an excellent idea. The more local residents we can get on record opposing the roundup, the stronger our case becomes. The conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. Michael opened it to find Ms. Reynolds from Child Protective Services, clipboard in hand. Mr. Matthews, I'm here for our scheduled home visit. Michael had completely forgotten about the appointment. He glanced back at the living room, now covered in wild horse documentation, and wondered how this would look to the stern social worker. Of course, please come in, he said, trying to sound calm and collected. We're just working on a community project. Ms. Reynolds entered, her gaze sweeping over the maps and papers before landing on Lily. Hello, Lily. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks, Lily replied brightly. My ankle only hurts a little now. And we're working to save the horses that saved me. Mrs. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Michael quickly made introductions. This is Elena Vasquez. She runs a wild horse sanctuary and is helping us with some conservation efforts. Elena, sensing the tension, smoothly gathered her papers. I should get going. Lily, Michael, why don't you look over these documents and I'll make the calls we discussed. We can meet again tomorrow to finalize our strategy. After Elena left, Ms. Reynolds began her formal assessment, inspecting the kitchen, bathrooms, and Lily's bedroom, making notes throughout. You have a lovely home, she commented, sounding somewhat surprised. It's very child-centered. Lily is the center of my world, Michael said simply. Back in the living room, Mrs. Reynolds sat across from them. Lily, would you mind if I speak with your father privately for a few minutes? Lily shot her father a concerned look, but Michael nodded reassuringly. It's okay, Lilypad. Why don't you go to your room and rest your ankle for a bit? Once Lily had reluctantly hobbled to her bedroom, Ms. Reynolds addressed Michael directly. Mr. Matthews, I want to be completely transparent with you. When this case came to our attention, a child lost overnight in a storm while her father was taking photographs, it raised some red flags. Michael tensed but remained silent. However, she continued, after reviewing statements from the park rangers, hospital staff, and now seeing your home environment, I'm inclined to classify this as an unfortunate accident rather than negligence. Relief washed over Michael. Thank you. It was the worst moment of my life realizing she was missing. I can imagine, Ms. Reynolds said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Losing a spouse and raising a child alone is challenging under the best circumstances. Accidents happen, even to the most vigilant parents. She made a few more notes, then looked up. This horse conservation project, it seems very important to both of you. It is, Michael confirmed. The horses that protected Lily are scheduled to be rounded up and removed from their home range next week. We're trying to prevent that. Ms. Reynolds considered this. It sounds like a meaningful way to process the trauma of what happened, turning a frightening experience into positive action. Michael hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. This wasn't just about saving the horses. It was also about helping Lily find meaning in what had happened to her. Well, Mr. Matthews, I think we're done here. I'll be submitting my report recommending this case be closed with no further action needed. You clearly have a loving home here, and Lily's well cared for. Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you. That means a lot. I do have one last question, though, Ms. Reynolds said, pausing at the door. This wild horse roundup you're trying to stop, when is it scheduled? Monday morning, Michael replied. 4 days from now, Ms. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. My nephew works for the local newspaper. He might be interested in covering your community meeting if you decide to hold one. Public attention can be quite powerful in these situations. With that surprising offer of support, she left, leaving Michael to wonder if perhaps they had more allies than he'd realized. Lily emerged from her room the moment the front door closed. What did she say? Are we in trouble? Not at all, Michael reassured her. In fact, she's closing our case. And she even offered to help with the horses. Lily's face lit up. Really? That's awesome. See, Dad? Everyone wants to help once they know what's happening. Energized by this small victory, they spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. Michael called the community center to reserve a space for Saturday night, while Lily worked on creating digital flyers they could share online. By dinner time, they had outlined an ambitious agenda for the next 3 days. Okay, so tomorrow we meet with Elena again and finalize the petition, Michael summarized as they ate. Friday, we gather as many signatures as possible and prepare our presentations for the community meeting. Saturday is the meeting itself, and Sunday we go to see Citana, Lily finished excitedly. Ranger Blackwood said we could visit her before they release her back to the mountains. Michael hadn't yet told Lily about Ranger Blackwood's call earlier that day. The release had been delayed due to pressure from BLM officials who argued that since the entire herd was scheduled for roundup on Monday, it made little sense to release Citana only to capture her again days later. About that, Lily Pad, he said gently. There's been a small change of plans. Citana is still at the ranger station. They're keeping her there until we sort out this roundup situation. Lily's face fell. But that's not fair. She should be with her family. I know, sweetheart. That's why we're working so hard to stop the roundup. If we succeed, Citana and her entire herd will remain free. And if we don't, Lily asked in a small voice. Michael hesitated. He didn't want to burden his daughter with worst-case scenarios, but he'd promised her honesty. If we don't stop it completely, we'll fight for the next best thing, to have the horses relocated to a sanctuary like Elena's, where they can stay together and live in a semi-wild state. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be better than the alternative. Lily nodded solemnly. But we're going to win. We have to. We'll certainly give it our best shot, Michael agreed. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Michael sat at his computer reviewing the photographs he'd taken of the Elk Mountain herd over the past year. Each image captured something special. The powerful muscles rippling beneath glossy coats as they ran, the tender interactions between mares and foals, the watchful vigilance of the lead stallion, and in many of them, Citana stood out, proud, intelligent, maternal. These weren't just beautiful animals. They were a complex society with relationships, memories, and traditions passed down through generations. The thought of that society being shattered, the horses separated and confined, was heartbreaking. Michael selected the most powerful images and began working on a presentation for the community meeting. Pictures could convey what words often couldn't, the majesty and dignity of these creatures that deserved to remain free. Dawn broke on Friday with renewed purpose. Elena arrived early, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s whom she introduced as Dr. James Harrison, a wildlife biologist specializing in equine genetics. Dr. Harrison has agreed to sign our petition and speak at tomorrow's meeting, Elena explained. His scientific credentials will lend significant weight to our argument about preserving the herd's genetic heritage. The genetic diversity of the Elk Mountain herd represents an irreplaceable natural and historical resource, Dr. Harrison explained, his academic tone belied by the passion in his eyes. Once lost, these specific genetic combinations can never be recreated. As they finalized the petition, more supporters began to arrive. Ranchers who appreciated the cultural significance of the wild horses, local business owners who recognized their tourism value, environmental activists concerned about ecosystem balance, and ordinary citizens moved by Lily's story. Throughout the day, Michael coordinated media coverage, securing commitments from not only the local newspaper, but also a regional television station and several popular nature-focused blogs. Lily, despite her injured ankle, insisted on helping, charming everyone with her detailed knowledge of the horses and the passionate way she described Citana's protection. By nightfall, exhaustion had set in, but so had hope. The petition now bore over 200 signatures, with more coming in online every hour. The community center was confirmed for tomorrow's meeting, and advance interest suggested they might need to set up overflow seating. As Michael tucked Lily into bed that night, she caught his hand. "Dad, do you think Citana knows we're trying to help her?" Michael considered the question thoughtfully. "I don't know, Lilypad. Horses don't think like we do, but they do form bonds and they do remember. I think Citana formed a special bond with you, and somehow she'll know you're fighting for her." Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she smiled. "I dreamed about her last night. We were running together across the mountains and I wasn't even scared of falling off. It felt like flying." Michael smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "That sounds like a wonderful dream." "It wasn't just a dream, Dad," Lily murmured as she drifted off. "It was a promise." Saturday dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp autumn day that showcased the Colorado mountains in all their glory. The aspens had reached peak color, their golden leaves shimmering against the evergreen backdrop. As Michael drove Lily to the community center, he couldn't help but think what a perfect day it would be for photography, for capturing the wild horses running free against this spectacular landscape. The parking lot of the Silver Creek Community Center was already filling up when they arrived 2 hours early to set up. Elena and Dr. Harrison were waiting, along with a team of volunteers in matching Save the Elk Mountain Mustangs t-shirts that someone had quickly designed and printed overnight. "We've got a full house coming," Elena reported excitedly. "The petition signatures are over 500 now, and we've just heard that County Commissioner Davis is attending. He has a vote on the Regional Advisory Board that consults with the BLM." Michael was arranging his photography display when a familiar figure approached, Ranger Running Bear, still in uniform, but clearly attending in an unofficial capacity. "This is quite a gathering you've organized," the ranger observed with quiet approval. "You should know that Citana has become something of a celebrity at the station. Everyone wants to see the mare who saved a child." "How is she?" Lily asked anxiously from her seat. The doctor had upgraded her to a walking boot, but she still needed to minimize time on her feet. "Restless," Running Bear replied honestly. "She doesn't belong in a pen, even a comfortable one. Wild things need freedom like they need air. We're doing everything we can to make sure she gets back to her herd," Michael assured him. "I know." Running Bear hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's something else you should know. I've heard through the grapevine that the BLM is considering moving up the roundup to tomorrow instead of Monday." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "What? Why?" "They're aware of your meeting today. They don't want the public relations nightmare of capturing horses that have become local heroes. If they move quickly before your petition can be filed, they can claim they were just following the original plan," Michael finished grimly. "Can you confirm this?" Running Bear shook his head. "It's just a rumor, but from a reliable source. I thought you should be prepared." This changed everything. If the roundup was moved to tomorrow, their carefully planned legal strategy would be too late. Michael pulled Elena aside and relayed Running Bear's information. "This complicates things," she admitted, her expression tightening with concern. "The courts don't open until Monday morning. Even with an emergency filing, we can't get an injunction before then." "So what do we do?" Michael asked desperately. Elena thought for a moment. "We change our strategy. Instead of focusing solely on the legal petition, we mobilize direct community action." She turned to the growing crowd. "If enough people show up at the roundup site and protest, they might be forced to delay." "A peaceful protest," Michael clarified. "Absolutely. Completely law-abiding but highly visible. We'll need media there to document everything." Michael nodded, his mind racing. "I'll adjust my presentation to include a call to action. We'll need volunteers, transportation coordination, sign." The community meeting was scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. By 1:30, the main hall was filled to capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the corridor. Local TV cameras were set up at the back, and reporters from several newspapers had secured front row seats. At precisely 2 p.m., Elena took the stage to welcome everyone and outline the purpose of the gathering. She was followed by Dr. Harrison, who presented the scientific case for preserving the Elk Mountain herd's genetic heritage. Several other speakers followed. A local historian discussing the cultural significance of wild horses in Colorado's history, a tourism board member highlighting their economic value, a tribal elder speaking about indigenous perspectives on the spiritual importance of wild horses. Finally, it was Michael's turn. He had prepared a sophisticated presentation of his photographs, but in light of Running Bear's warning, he'd hastily revised his closing remarks. "These aren't just beautiful animals," he told a rapt audience as images of the Elk Mountain Mustangs filled the large screen behind him. "They're a living connection to our past and a vital part of our ecosystem. They've roamed these mountains for centuries, long before any of us were here." The photos transitioned to shots of Citana, her proud profile, her intelligent eyes, her protective stance among the herd. This mare, known as Citana or Child Mother, did something extraordinary 3 days ago. When my daughter Lily was lost in a storm, injured and at risk of hypothermia, Citana and her herd formed a protective circle around her. They shared their body heat through a freezing night and ultimately helped lead rescuers to her location. Michael's voice grew more urgent. "We've just received information that the Bureau of Land Management may be planning to conduct their scheduled roundup tomorrow, Sunday, instead of Monday as originally announced. They're hoping to avoid the public scrutiny that this meeting represents." A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. "We can't let that happen. We have legal actions in process, but they won't be effective if the horses are already captured. So I'm asking for your help, not just your signatures, but your presence. Tomorrow morning at dawn, we're organizing a peaceful presence at the roundup location. The more witnesses there are, the more difficult it will be for them to proceed without addressing our concerns." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hands shot up all around the room as people volunteered trucks, supplies, communication equipment, and most importantly, their time. As the logistics were being coordinated, Michael noticed that Lily had left her seat. He found her at his photography display, staring intently at a large portrait of Citana. "Are you okay, Lily Pad?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She nodded, her expression unusually serious for a 10-year-old. "Dad, I need to be there tomorrow. I need to see Citana again." Michael hesitated. The roundup site would be no place for a child, especially one with an injured ankle. But when he looked into his daughter's determined blue eyes, he saw something that gave him pause, a wisdom and connection that went beyond her years. "Okay," he agreed finally, "but you stay with me at all times, and if I say we need to leave, we leave. No arguments." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Dad. I promise I'll be good. But Citana needs to see me. She needs to know I didn't forget her." As the meeting concluded with a standing ovation and people broke into action groups to prepare for the next day, Michael couldn't shake a powerful feeling that had been growing since Lily's rescue, that there was something almost mystical about the connection between his daughter and the wild mare, something that defied easy explanation but might just be powerful enough to change the course of events. The sun was sinking behind the mountains as they drove home, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink. Tomorrow would bring either victory or heartbreak. Either way, Michael knew that none of them, not Lily, not himself, not the community that had rallied around them, and certainly not the wild horses of Elk Mountain, would ever be quite the same again. Dawn broke over the mountains in a symphony of gold and crimson. Michael and Lily had risen before first light, preparing in silence, both aware of the gravity of the day ahead. The walking boot made navigating difficult for Lily, but she moved with determined focus, refusing any suggestion that she might stay behind. "I promised Citana," was all she said, her young face set with a resolve that reminded Michael painfully of Sarah. They arrived at the designated meeting point, a roadside turnout 2 miles from the planned roundup site, to find an astonishing number of vehicles already gathered. Pickup trucks, SUVs, even a few horse trailers stood in neat rows. Their occupants clustered in small groups, sipping coffee from thermoses and checking equipment. Elena approached as they parked, her expression both surprised and pleased. "We have over 100 people here already and more arriving every minute." The media showed up too. 2 television stations and several journalists. Michael nodded approvingly. "Any word on whether the BLM is actually planning to start today instead of tomorrow?" Nothing confirmed, but several people reported unusual activity at the staging area last night. Trucks arriving, temporary corrals being set up. "We need to assume they're moving forward." "What's the plan?" Lily asked, adjusting her crutches. Elena knelt to Lily's level, her weathered face serious. "We're going to form a peaceful presence at the main access points to the valley. Not blocking anything, that would be illegal, but making our presence known. The media will document everything. If the BLM officials see the level of community support and media attention, they might reconsider." "And if they don't?" Michael asked quietly. Elena's eyes hardened. Then they'll have to conduct their roundup with the entire community watching. Every helicopter flight, every frightened horse, every foal separated from its mother, all of it recorded and broadcast. No matter what happens today, the days of conducting these roundups without public scrutiny are over. The convoy set off as the sun cleared the eastern peaks. Michael drove slowly, conscious of Lily's ankle and the bumpy forest road. In the rearview mirror, he could see the long line of vehicles following, a visual testament to how quickly and powerfully the community had mobilized. They reached the staging area just as BLM trucks were arriving. As Elena had predicted, the setup was already well underway. Metal panels arranged in a series of corrals, a chute system for processing captured horses, and most ominously, the helicopter that would be used to drive the horses from the mountains. The BLM officials looked startled as vehicle after vehicle pulled up and people began to emerge. Not angry protesters with signs, but ordinary citizens, families, ranchers, business owners, elders. They positioned themselves silently along the perimeter. Cameras ready, expressions resolute. Michael helped Lily from the truck, supporting her as she maneuvered with her crutches. A tall man in a BLM uniform approached them, his face carefully neutral. "This is an official government operation," he stated. "You folks need to maintain a safe distance from the equipment and personnel." "We understand," Michael replied calmly. "We're here as observers and concerned citizens. We won't interfere with your work." The official's eyes flicked to Lily, then back to Michael. You're the photographer, and this is the girl who got lost in the storm." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Michael confirmed. "My daughter Lily." The official, his name badge identified him as Director Harmon, seemed to struggle internally for a moment. "Look, I understand this is emotional for your family, but we have a job to do here. These roundups are necessary for proper land management." Before Michael could respond, Lily spoke up, her voice clear and steady. "Have you met Citana, the mayor who saved me?" Director Harmon looked uncomfortable. "I've been briefed about the incident, yes. She's still at the ranger station," Lily continued. "She should be with her family, but instead, she's in a pen. And now you want to put all the other horses in pens too. Young lady, wild horse management is a complex issue." "It's not complex to the horses," Lily interrupted, a fire in her blue eyes. They just want to be free. They've lived here for hundreds of years. This is their home." A news camera had drifted closer, capturing the exchange. Director Harmon noticed and straightened his uniform jacket self-consciously. "We follow established protocols based on scientific assessment of range conditions," he said stiffly, now clearly speaking for the camera as much as for Lily. "Overpopulation leads to overgrazing, which harms the ecosystem and ultimately the horses themselves." "Is that why you moved the roundup up a day?" Elena interjected, joining them. "Scientific assessment? Or was it to avoid the attention this community has generated?" Director Harmon's face tightened. "Schedule adjustments are made based on operational considerations." "Such as avoiding lawsuits?" Elena pressed. "We have a petition for an emergency injunction ready to file first thing tomorrow morning, with over 1,000 signatures and expert testimony regarding the unique genetic value of this specific herd." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching, not from the main road, but from the ranger station access path. A Park Service Jeep pulled up, and Ranger Blackwood emerged, followed by Ranger Running Bear. Between them, they led a horse trailer. Michael felt Lily tense beside him. "Is Citana in there?" she whispered. As if in answer, a familiar whinny emerged from the trailer. Lily's face lit up with recognition and joy. Ranger Blackwood approached Director Harmon. "We've brought the mare that was temporarily in our custody," she announced formally. "Since she's part of the herd scheduled for today's gather operation, we thought it made sense to transfer her directly." The BLM director frowned. "This wasn't in the operational plan." "Plans change," Ranger Running Bear said quietly, with a significant look at the crowd of observers and the media cameras. "Sometimes we need to adapt to circumstances." Director Harmon clearly wasn't pleased, but with cameras recording every word and gesture, he merely nodded stiffly. "Fine. Put her in holding pen 3 with the other mares once we bring them in." "Actually," Ranger Blackwood said, "before we do that, there's a special request. The child who was protected by this mare would like to say goodbye." All eyes turned to Lily, who stood supported by her crutches, looking suddenly small but determined. Director Harmon looked like he wanted to refuse, but the presence of the media made that politically impossible. 5 minutes, he conceded. And with supervision, Ranger Running Bear opened the trailer door and carefully led Citana out. The chestnut mare emerged with proud dignity, her blonde mane catching the morning light. She seemed remarkably calm despite the circumstances, her intelligent eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Then her gaze landed on Lily, and something remarkable happened. The mare stilled, ears pricked forward in recognition. A soft nickering sound emerged from her throat. "She remembers me," Lily breathed, her face glowing. With Michael hovering protectively beside her, Lily approached the mare. Citana lowered her head as Lily reached up to stroke her muzzle, exactly as she had done that night in the storm. "Thank you for saving me," Lily said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm trying to save you too, but I don't know if I can." Citana pressed her velvety nose against Lily's cheek, a gesture so gentle and deliberate that several observers gasped. The television cameras captured every moment of the unlikely reunion between wild horse and human child. "Dad," Lily whispered urgently, "look at her shoulder." Michael followed his daughter's gaze and noticed something he hadn't seen before. A distinctive mark on Citana's shoulder that had been hidden by her winter coat during previous photographs. It resembled an elaborate C with flowing lines, almost like a brand, Elena gasped, having joined them, but not a modern one. "That's an old Spanish colonial brand, the kind used by the earliest European settlers in this region." "Doctor," Harrison pushed forward excitedly. "May I?" he asked, approaching cautiously. Citana allowed him to examine the mark more closely. "This is extraordinary," the scientist breathed. "This isn't just any Spanish colonial brand. This is the mark of the Coronado expedition of 1540. There are historical records of horses bearing this exact mark escaping during that journey through the Southwest. This mare isn't just descended from Spanish colonial stock. She's direct evidence of living history, a genetic and cultural treasure beyond price." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even Director Harmon looked taken aback by this revelation. "If this is authenticated," one of the journalists called out, "would it change the status of the herd in terms of protection?" Director Harmon shifted uncomfortably. That would require assessment by our historical resources team. Assessment that can't happen if the horses are rounded up today," Elena pointed out. "Once they're removed from their home range and separated, that living historical context is lost forever." The tension in the air was palpable as Director Harmon found himself in an increasingly untenable position. The crowd had grown larger, the media presence more pronounced, and now this unexpected historical discovery had changed the equation entirely. A radio on his belt crackled. "Sir, the helicopter pilot is asking for final clearance to begin the drive." All eyes turned to the BLM director. In that moment of suspended time, Lily reached up to touch Citana's neck once more. "You should be free," she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "All of you should be free." Perhaps it was the cameras, or the crowd, or the unexpected historical significance of the brand, or simply the undeniable power of seeing the child and the wild mare together. Whatever the reason, Director Harmon's rigid demeanor finally cracked. "Stand down," he said into the radio. "Postpone the operation pending further review." A cheer erupted from the gathered crowd. Director Harmon raised his hands for silence. "This is a temporary postponement only," he clarified. "We need to investigate this historical claim and review the petition that's been presented. The management evaluation will continue, and a decision will be made based on all relevant factors." It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a crucial reprieve. As the news spread through the crowd, celebrations broke out. Michael pulled Lily into a gentle hug, mindful of her injured ankle. "You did it, Lily Pad," he whispered. "You gave them a fighting chance." Lily shook her head, her eyes still on Citana. "We all did it, Dad." Together, the next decision faced was what to do with Citana in the meantime. After a brief consultation, it was agreed that since she had already been separated from the herd, she would be temporarily relocated to Elena's sanctuary until the final determination was made. "She'll have space to run there," Elena assured Lily. "And I promise you can visit her anytime." As Citana was led back to the trailer for transport to the sanctuary, she turned to look back at Lily one last time. There was something in that final gaze that transcended the division between human and animal. A recognition, an understanding, perhaps even a promise. 3 months later, Michael and Lily stood on a ridge overlooking the valley that had become famous as the home of the Elk Mountain Mustangs. The winter snow had melted, revealing new spring grass that rippled like a green sea in the gentle breeze. So much had changed since that fateful day. The petition had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, with the BLM not only halting the roundup permanently, but designating the Elk Mountain Range as a protected historical habitat due to the confirmed Spanish colonial connection. Elena's sanctuary had been contracted to monitor the herd's health and numbers, using minimally invasive methods that respected their wild nature. Michael's photographs and articles had launched a national conversation about wild horse management practices, earning him a prestigious conservation journalism award. And Lily, still sporting a lighter walking boot as her ankle completed its healing, had become something of a celebrity in wildlife conservation circles, speaking to school groups about her experience and the importance of protecting wild species. "There they are," Lily cried suddenly, pointing to movement at the far end of the valley. Michael raised his camera, focusing the telephoto lens. Through it, he could clearly see the Elk Mountain herd making their way across the spring landscape. Manes flowing in the wind, foals frolicking alongside their mothers. And at the lead, unmistakable with her chestnut coat and blonde mane, was Citana. The mare had been released back to her herd 2 weeks earlier, after the final protection order was signed. Elena had worried that her time in captivity might have changed her standing in the herd hierarchy, but those concerns had proven unfounded. The other horses had welcomed her back as if she'd never left, resuming their ancient patterns of migration across the mountain range that had been their home for centuries. "Do you think she's happy?" Lily asked softly. Michael lowered his camera to look at his daughter. In the past months, he'd seen her grow and change in ways that went beyond physical healing. The experience had awakened something in her, a sense of purpose, a connection to the natural world, a quiet confidence that reminded him powerfully of Sarah. "I think she's exactly where she belonged," he answered. "Just like you." Lily smiled, leaning against her father as they watched the distant horses. Neither felt the need to say more. Some bonds didn't require words, whether between father and daughter, or between a child and the wild creature that had recognized in her a kindred spirit worth protecting. The wind carried the distant sound of nickering as the horses disappeared over a rise, continuing their endless journey across the mountains they called home. Free at last and forever.